when a hiring manager is trying to figure out what they want, of course, they're going to want everything under the sun. They want these certifications, this many years of experience. And at the end of the day, they never get everything they want. So what ends up really happening is they end up hiring someone they like, know, and trust.
Let's go! Hello and welcome to the Brand New You Show, the podcast dedicated to helping you build your brand. We meet here each week to learn how building your brand can help you grow your influence, amplify your online reputation, and ultimately impact your career. I'm your host, Ryan Roten, and today I welcome to the show Olivia Gamber, founder of OccupationalOlivia.com, where she strives to develop people to maximize their potential at work. In addition to Occupational Olivia, she is head of talent and organizational development at her current company. Because of her position, Olivia knows all too well that being good at your job isn't enough in today's highly competitive environment. You also have to be able to build relationships, navigate complex corporate matrices, and develop many other key skills. Olivia is also the host of the Occupational Olivia podcast, and she is an author. Her book, The Career Upgrade Roadmap, 90 Days to a Better Job and a Better Life, is a #1 bestseller in 3 categories on Amazon, including job hunting, career development, and vocational guidance. Olivia, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Brand New You Show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Great introduction. I appreciate that.
No problem. You're welcome. It's amazing what you can find on the internet. Before we dive in, and I'm really excited to talk to you about several different things today, in addition to your book. But before we dive in, I have one question that I ask all of my guests because I am forever curious about, it seems, everything in life. But if you could vacation in only one place for the rest of your vacation days, where would you go?
Wow, good question. Let me think. I think so far in my travels, my favorite place is probably Paris. I really like the food and the vibes there and shopping.
All right.
So that would be my go-to spot.
Awesome. You and Lee McLeod have something in common. I interviewed Lee, I think in show 5 or 6, and she also said Paris.
Nice.
So as we get into this, am I correct in saying that you still have a full-time day job, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And in your role, I described you as the head of talent and organizational development at your company. So what exactly is your role?
Great question. It's a broad scope. So organizational development means a lot of different things to different companies depending on what stage they're at. But the talent piece and organizational development piece are really just including recruiting. So I manage a team of recruiters for my company. And then also our learning and development space. So we do the training and we're working on actually rolling out online training to the organization. So those are really big picture, high level. That's basically what I'm responsible for, development and attracting talent.
Okay. So when did the idea for Occupational Olivia come to you?
I think I would have to say it was in April of 2014. And it was really solidified, I think, when right after I got married, I was sitting there and the best man of our wedding was really just going through how much I had helped him in his career and this and that. And then shortly after we went on our honeymoon in Hawaii, and it's, when you have the time to finally reflect on what you want and what excites you, I think just having that space to think about things. And I've always had a passion around development. That's kind of why I got into the career space that I'm in. But ultimately, I was just thinking about the future and how I can ultimately create a lifestyle that I want. And that is really where I started to do some digging and looking around at other people doing things. And that's how I've come across people like Scott Barlow, who were able to be successful doing this full time outside of an organization and have a lot more flexibility to be there for their family. And ultimately, that's what I want. I'm not there yet, but that's really the vision, is finding a way to help people outside of the corporate walls.
Okay. And for those who may not know, Scott Barlow is the host of the Happen to Your Career podcast, which is another podcast I recommend people check out. So you said something there that interests me because you and I share a common thing here, which is we both have a full-time day job. And so I'm curious, since your side, we'll call it a side hustle, is very closely related to what you do in your day job. Have you shared with your current employer what it is that you're doing on the side?
I have. I did have a conversation with my boss about my website. It was a very high level conversation and it didn't last very long, but I did talk to her before I started publishing because I knew that people were going to be seeing it because I'm connected with so many people, including her on LinkedIn. And I knew that it was going to come out one way or another. So I just wanted to be proactive about that and have the conversation.
Okay. And it sounds like it went well. I mean, they didn't make you say no.
Right. No, honestly, I don't think she fully understood it, to be honest with you. I think her reaction was, that's fine. Like, it was really just simple. She's like, that's fine. Obviously, you know what, you shouldn't be publishing about anything specific to Taylor Morrison. And so it was a really quick conversation. And I don't know that she really understood the why behind it. I know she knows I'm really passionate about career development and that I'm publishing very frequently because I do. I share my podcast and everything on LinkedIn. So it's very likely she could just see just how involved I am with it. But I did let her know about the website and that I would be publishing and that this is something that I'm doing on the side of Taylor Morrison.
Yeah, now I could see in your case where your boss could view it too as, well, it's you operating within the scope, kind of within the scope of your job, but you're expanding your knowledge base and you're becoming, say, better at your current job. So I can understand that. But where you sit in the recruiting space, if you were to see a candidate apply for a job at your current company and the position they're applying for is like one particular thing, say product management, for example. But yet when you start to do their research, you find that they do this side hustle that's completely different and unrelated to what they're applying for. If you find a candidate like that, how does that impact your decision or thought process as you evaluate that candidate for the position that they applied for?
If I were recruiting for the job, I would want to understand their motivations for taking the job and also what their goals are, because ultimately you want somebody that's going to be all in. And I think that if that's really kind of their exit strategy, or you get a sense that the job is really just a means to providing to their, I don't know, bills, lifestyle, or whatever, I don't think it would be a good thing for advancing a career in the job space because they're branding themselves as wanting to do something completely different.
All right. I think it's something that people need to be aware of, that once they start to put themselves out there and they brand themselves differently than what maybe their professional career has been, it could cause some confusion among recruiters and other people who might try to market them for another position down the road.
Yeah, I think there's still kind of a lot of stigma around the idea of this person is starting their own business. Do they really want a job? And even if it is in the same space, I see that happening a lot. And I see those kinds of conversations happening with hiring managers or recruiters. So I would say sometimes you've got to really decide what you want and how to brand yourself and be consistent about it. Because if you blend the two, sometimes it just dilutes your brand altogether.
I want to talk about your podcast now. You started Occupational Olivia and I think you said April of last year. When did the podcast come about? Was it about the same time or did it come a few months later?
I registered the domain last year or in 2014, and it was really just an exploration project for the first few months. I was just publishing, writing about my experiences and that type of thing. It wasn't until I started to meet people in the space to see how they were actually creating a business around this. That's when I saw the platform of podcasting. And it really happened when I met Scott, because Scott Barlow has been kind of a mentor to me, and seeing how he was able to expand his platform through the podcasting. And it's just a great way to honestly develop yourself while creating value for people out there. And it creates a lot of content that can also be used in so many different ways. It gives you ideas. So I love it. And I've been doing it since earlier this year is when I started publishing on podcasting.
Okay, awesome. Well, and I've listened to several of your shows, and I highly recommend anybody who's listening to this today to go check out your podcast, which is just Occupational Olivia. If they search that in, they'll find it. It's very good. But you mentioned something in there that might be a good segue for us to start to talk about the book, which is that you create content that can be used in other medium.
Mm-hmm.
So before we dive into the book, first of all, congratulations on the success of the book. Coming
Thank
up
you.
in number 1 in 3 categories is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm still soaking it in right now. It's sometimes I'm surprised that it was the goal, but I wasn't always sure I was going to hit it.
Well, I've read the book. Actually, I've gone through it twice now. It's very good, and I love the process that we're gonna walk through here. This career roadmap. The book itself is titled Career Upgrade Roadmap: 90 Days to a Better Job and a Better Life. So the question that I like to ask all authors when I have them on is why did you decide to write a book?
I think for me, it was a goal because I wanted to get my message out to more people. And there's a lot of ways that I can help people. I could either give them my time, which is so limited, especially with the full-time job right now. And then I also have a course that can be a little pricey for somebody, especially if you're unemployed. And so I wanted to create a way for people to get knowledge and get my process and message out there that was more affordable to some people out there that maybe haven't ever invested in themselves that much, but still I wanted to give them a way to make a difference on their life.
Okay. You may have just mentioned it, but let's talk about specifics here. Who did you write the book for?
Great question. And I always think about usually a specific person because it's easier for me to write when I think that way. But really the type of person I think that can benefit most from my book is somebody that is underemployed, highly educated. And when I say highly educated, I mean bachelor's and master's degrees. And they're really just in a position, they just kind of fell into it, or that's the job that they feel that they can get right now, but they haven't really explored all of their options, and they don't necessarily know what their options are. And another thing is they're really unhappy with their job because they're either not paid very well or they're not being challenged. And so they've really just accepted being underemployed because they don't know that they can get any better. And they want more, but they kind of have given up at this point, and they're just feeling stuck, and they're at the verge of accepting it, but they want to change, and they haven't just found out how to approach the situation.
So I'd imagine there's a lot of people who are going to be in their cars right now who just scooted up a little bit closer to the edges of their seats because you just described them. From where you sit as the head of talent management and development, what do you think has changed the most about recruiting and or job searching over the last few years?
Good question. I think there's a lot that's changed in the last decade, I would say, but I'm starting to learn more because when I wasn't in the inside, I was completely clueless, but I'm just starting to see how people make decisions. And in most cases, none of the hiring decisions are 100% objective and made based off of resumes and facts. That's basically the bottom line that I'm learning. And what I'm also learning is that a lot of the positions and jobs that are being created are really broad, and the role isn't a clearly defined role. They're looking for more new jobs that haven't existed before, and they're looking for people that obviously more than likely haven't held that job title before because it's so new. But a lot of the jobs are really just being filled through relationships. But more than all, I would say that it's become more competitive in the job landscape for the best jobs.
With that in mind, how do you see most candidates going about today looking for a job?
Good question. I think most of them are really just going to Indeed.com or Googling, a job board and just trying to blast their resume out there to as many positions as possible, because I think most people think about it as a numbers game. The more they put themselves out there, the more likely something will stick. And they're also really not sure what they want. So they kind of go with whatever sounds somewhat interesting that they think they have a shot at, and they submit their application. And I know that's a really time consuming process, especially with some of these applications. They take quite a while to fill out.
With that in mind, people submitting online, doing applications, I would imagine then you get to see a whole lot of resumes for every open position that you have. How much time do you think a typical recruiter spends looking at a resume?
Probably 10 seconds.
Wow. In 10 seconds, what can you glean from a resume in 10 seconds?
Sometimes it's surface level, just looking at the formatting and the first few lines and their most recent job.
In your book, you divide job seekers into kind of two buckets. You've got A players, and then you pretty much have everybody else.
Yeah.
Okay. So before I start to dive into some of the questions specific to the career upgrade roadmap, what is the difference between an A player and everyone else?
I would say the biggest difference is they're less passive with their career. They are more likely to take control of the situation rather than sit back and put it in the hands of a recruiter. Or I know some people, especially if they haven't been in the job market for a while and they're finally looking to make a change or a transition, the first thought that comes to mind, which blows my mind, is they want to call a recruiter to help them find a job. And that's really not their top priority. Unfortunately, your career and managing that for you isn't really front of mind for that recruiter. And as sad as it is to say.
Right. Well, but it's true. I mean, a recruiter is paid to put people in jobs. That reminds me of what Tim Sommier said back on show 4. Their job is to headhunt, to go find a person to put in a job that's qualified for it, and that's it. And as you said, he's not paid to work with me to make sure that I get everything I want out of my career. It's just not how it works.
Right, exactly.
Some myths that you talk about in your book, or excuses, if you will, that people come up with for, why they aren't doing a job search correctly or why they can't maybe go get a certain job. I want to talk about a few of them now, which is one, and the first one is do you need a strong network to get a job today?
I would say yes. To get the best jobs, they're filled through networking.
Okay. And what about marketable skills?
Marketable skills, yes, too. And I think most people have skills that are marketable. They just don't know how to market it. I think people are really good at saying what they don't like and what they're not good at, but not necessarily as good as highlighting their strengths and marketing their experience.
So, I mean, let's talk about that. You can hear people, I'm sure you hear people come in with excuses and they say, I can't apply for that job. I'm not really qualified for that. You approach someone who gives you that as a reason for why they will not or cannot apply for a position.
I think most people that do look at qualifications are already thinking about things in the wrong way, because at the end of the day, it's a matter of, will I like this job and can I get this job? I don't think if you're just looking at checking boxes off of a qualification, then I think you're already behind the 8 ball, because your strategy and approach are already going to be off. Because at the end of the day, when a hiring manager is trying to figure out what they want, of course, they're going to want everything. And so they're going to list off, we call it the unicorn or the purple squirrel in recruiting, because they always want everything under the sun. They want these certifications, this many years of experience. And at the end of the day, they never get everything they want, because that's just what they're asking for. And a lot of times in the market, it just doesn't exist. So what ends up really happening is they end up hiring someone they like, know, and trust, and rarely somebody that ends up meeting every single checkbox on their qualification.
Okay. And that's perfect, because your process, the career upgrade roadmap, I believe, is exactly what candidates need in order to get the hiring managers to know, like, and trust them. The process is 5 steps, which consists of target identification, market validation, consistent connection, crafting your career narrative, and the red carpet application. And I want to talk about each one of them, but let's start with target identification. What is the target identification step?
So this is the step that I think most people skip when they start to go out and find a job. So target identification, just to say it in one quick sentence, is really just forcing yourself to get laser focused on what you want. And this takes work, and it's a process of really going out and getting specific on the front end before you do any applications, do any networking. Because if you don't know what you want, then it's going to make everything else you do very untargeted and ineffective. So really, this process is about getting clear on what you want And obviously you want to make sure whatever you decide to target is a role that you would like and also can get. And so that process is one of the most, I think, time intensive, because you have to force yourself to make a decision, and people are really afraid to do that. Especially on the front end of the process.
So we're not applying for jobs at this step, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What do you do for people who kind of feel stuck and they really don't know what they want to do? How are they supposed to do target identification?
That's a good question. And most people that come to me or are looking for help really don't know what they want. They just know that what they're doing isn't it. And so I would recommend that instead of trying to figure it out on your own, you're not going to get there alone. The best way to get clarity is by going external to the market and trying to understand opportunities in the market and how you fit into them. So that's really the process I outline. And instead of starting with yourself, which I know a lot of career experts out there would recommend, focusing on yourself and your passions and your interests and where you want to live, I think that's really helpful. But I think without adding new information to all of that it's not going to give you any forward momentum. And I think naturally, no matter what, any opportunity that you're assessing, you're going to be looking through the lens of, would I like this and would I be good at it? And can I actually get this? But I think just having that framework is natural. And what I teach is really just immediately taking action and getting small wins, because while you're exploring the different options, you're also building your network at the same time.
Okay. So two of the key things that you talk about in target identification is focusing on job titles and companies. So let's start with job titles first. Why do you have candidates or clients focus on job titles?
Because at the end of the day, it's concrete and it's specific. So if you're networking or you're out talking to people and you say, I'm looking for a job, and they say, oh, what are you looking to do? And you say, well, I'm kind of interested in customer service or maybe sales or marketing. At that point, the person really has no idea what you want or how they can help you. So they probably forget about it and move on with their day. On the flip side, if you say, I'm interested in being a financial analyst in Fortune 500 company in Phoenix, Arizona, do you know anybody in those companies that I could talk to and get to know? I'm trying to make sure I make a move that makes sense for me right now. That would be more effective, and you're more likely to get people to help you because you just sound more focused and competent. And I think at the end of the day, it just helps you get results much quicker than if you're shooting broad and you're also coming across like you don't know what you want.
So I get the job titles and narrowing companies. Figuring out what companies you want to work for is important, because now you can say, all right, I want these companies, but I don't want just any job at these companies. I want this specific job title. So that gets you more narrowed down and kind of focused. Where do you recommend people go to find job titles and companies?
LinkedIn is really the best tool. And another reason why I talk about job titles and companies, because the combination of those two is really where you find the magic. Because at the end of the day, one job title could mean or look completely different in several different organizations. I know my job title looks very different in a lot of organizations. So I think it's important to find the right fit and culture and team that makes sense for you and the type of work that you're going to be doing. So that's another reason, because if you just were to rely on job title alone, that would vary a lot company by company. And the best way to find out all of this is through LinkedIn, because not only can you see and research companies, you can easily filter the company size, industry. So that way you can get a pretty diverse group of companies. And then with job titles, you can start to research job titles that exist and people that are in those job titles. And then you can kind of see the path that they took to get there and all kinds of different research approaches. But really, the way I teach people to do it is through LinkedIn. There's a lot of other sites I recommend, but that's definitely the best way to go about it.
How many job titles and how many companies do you recommend people go out and try to find? Because there could be hundreds, thousands of each.
Good question. And I know that it's tough for people to narrow it down, but I recommend starting with 3 to 5. And because in all reality, if you go through this process, I set the stage for people to expect that you're probably not going to get it perfect on your first guess because you're really going off very limited information. You're going off research on maybe a job description. And that's not enough to know if you'll like the job and if you can get the job. So really starting with 3 to 5 and then just forcing yourself to start with your favorite one and testing it immediately. So that's the process, because I think if you force yourself to get hundreds of job titles, it's going to get overwhelming.
Okay, let's talk about testing, your statement, testing it immediately. And I believe when we do that, we're now moving into the second step in the process, which is market validation. So target identification is, I'm going to high level this and say it's kind of doing a lot of research. It's sitting behind a computer. It's finding titles and companies and things that you can do on LinkedIn. But when you move into market validation, what do you mean when you say we're going to test things out?
That means going to the market and speaking to experts. So when I say experts, I mean somebody that's either been in the role that you're interested in the company, or is currently in the role, or somebody that's a leader, or even just somebody in the industry that's considered an expert or a thought leader. It could be a professor or something like that, somebody that has firsthand experience with the role in the company. And I think it's good to get in front of these people, whether it's by phone or in person. I always recommend in person, but really your goal is to get more information about the job and the company and what that actual job looks like in reality and what type of person is successful in that job. Really, the goal of those conversations is figuring out, 1, will you like the job? And then 2, can you actually get the job?
Okay, so are we applying for jobs at this step?
No, you are not applying to jobs at this step.
Okay, so we're 2 steps in and we haven't applied for a job yet. This is like way different than anything most people would know about changing jobs or careers.
I know, it's very different, and it feels like you're doing a lot of work, and maybe your buddy over here has applied to 100 jobs and you feel like you're behind them. But at the end of the day, you're really front loading the work because you want to make sure that your next move is one that you're going to thrive in and the one that you're excited about. And so taking the time to really understand what you're getting into and also building a network is only going to get you closer to the best opportunities rather than just going out and going for the jobs that people are actually advertising for, because 80% of jobs are never posted on a job board.
Let's talk about these meetings with the expert. I know you prefer that they're in person. You know, sometimes maybe if you're looking to move to a new area or you want a job at a new area, obviously that may not be able to happen.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about the meeting itself. When you sit down, like some people are going to be even apprehensive to reach out to someone. How do you recommend people kind of broach the subject with someone they've never met before?
No, that's a really good question. And I remember the first time I was sending these messages, it was back in 2012. I was in San Diego and I was looking to move back to Arizona after grad school. And I was terrified, but I knew that what I was doing was not working. And I refused to continue to apply for jobs that I wasn't excited for and wasting hours away and just to hear nothing back. So I got to the point where I wanted to try something different. So I decided I was going to email or message 10 people a week, because everybody told you the best way to get jobs is through networking, but nobody really ever explains exactly what that looks like or how to do it. So I was just going to start testing things out. And the way that I learned that works the best is really keeping it short, simple, and informal. Because honestly, if you're in a place where you're not quite sure what you want to do, I think having that vulnerability is actually something that would work out to your advantage, because then you can be authentic about the conversation and the fact that you're really trying to explore opportunities and learn what you want to do in your next move. So I would just let them know that you think that the work that they have looks interesting, and you think you may be interested in getting into a similar company in a similar role, but you're not quite sure. Would they be willing to speak over coffee for 20 minutes? And then I would just give a really clear call to action, a date, and maybe some times, and leave it at that. It's just really short and simple. And I know it sounds almost too simple, but people love to give advice. And I was shocked at how many people responded to me.
So you mentioned a 20, 30-minute time frame.
Yeah.
How much preparation should someone do before they go into this meeting? Do they just go, well, it's just exploratory, so I'll just show up?
No, I would treat it like an interview. I mean, it's not an interview, but you want to make a good first impression, because if this person does like you and they see you as competent and they're willing to put their name down the line for you later on in the process, it's definitely good to make a strong first impression and show that you're serious. So I always recommend coming prepared with questions and always going to a location that's convenient for them, because you really want to make them have as little reason to say no as possible.
So let's assume we reach out to 10 people. We get one person who says, sure, I'll meet you for coffee. We have our meeting. We talk to them. We're not asking them for a job.
Right.
And then as we move into the third step, which is consistent connection, how does that networking meeting with that person apply or get followed up with in the consistent connection step?
Great question. I would say most people that network are really good at getting out there and shaking hands with as many people as possible, but where they lack is the follow-up. And I think that's really, it's the second or third contact where I personally was starting to see opportunities come to fruition. And so it was really just staying front of mind and also keeping them in the loop. So immediately after, I would always just thank the person. That's kind of a no-brainer. But then a week out, I would just follow up on my progress of the whole journey, because there's nothing worse than going out there and spending time with someone you don't really know when you could be with your family or at home, and then they fall off the face of the earth and you never hear from them again. So that's really what you don't want to happen. And you want to find ways to add value to them and stay in touch, so that way they can see how they helped you, and they can see how you've started to apply their advice or whatever it may be. But keeping that follow-up is so important, because it keeps you front of mind for them. And so now when they see an opportunity, they instantly make the connection that you would be a good fit, and they're more likely to recommend you for that.
Okay. And just so we're clear, we're not applying for a job at this step yet, are we?
No.
Okay. So we're 3 steps in and we haven't applied for any jobs yet.
And what's funny is naturally opportunities come up, because the best opportunities are never actually posted. They come up on the back end, and they're usually because they're so in demand of opportunities, they don't want to just, take anyone. They usually get filled through the back end process. And this is the process I'm kind of outlining for you guys.
Okay. So why is follow-up important, do you think?
Follow-up's important because otherwise the relationship fizzles away and they forget about you after a couple weeks. And then there's really no value that you're getting out of the relationship or the person that you met with. So it's kind of sad because you both put time in to meet with each other and have that one conversation, but it's kind of like dating. I mean, you're not going to immediately recommend somebody you just met once and go out of your way to, put your neck on the line for them. It's really building that trust over time.
Do you think this might be the hardest step for some people?
Definitely. I think reaching out and putting yourself out there is the scariest part.
Yeah, I spoke with David Fisher in a previous podcast, and he said one of the key things to any networking is following up. If you just meet with someone and walk away and never talk to them again, you may as well not even had the meeting to begin with.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're going through your process. We've identified job titles, companies, people who hold either the current title you want or have worked at the company you want to work for. We're reaching out to them now saying, hey, would you, I'm interested in learning more about this position or this company. Would you like to have coffee? We get together, we talk, whether it's in person or over the phone. We're now following up. We've not done any job applications yet at this point. Mm-hmm. And so as we move into the craft your career narrative step, are we applying for a job here yet? This
is where you're creating your marketing materials. And what I mean by that, it's cover letters and resumes.
Okay. Why is it important then, do you think, obviously cover letters and resumes are important, but what is different about just doing a resume and putting together a cover letter than crafting a narrative?
I think it's important because most people think of resumes as a list of responsibilities and skills, and it's really just a timeline of their work responsibilities that they've held. And I think that's really just a very narrow way of looking at resumes, because that's exactly how everybody else is doing it, and their content does not stand out. And it's really tough to rise to the top of the stack if you're thinking about it that way.
So how does a career narrative differ than a traditional resume?
I think the best way to think about it is, instead of marketing yourself as someone who's done XYZ, you're actually marketing yourself as somebody that can solve this problem for these people.
And so how do we take everything that we learned previously in the first 3 steps? Mm-hmm. How do we take all that and kind of wrap it up and put it into our narrative?
So there's a lot that you're gathering from these conversations, and really, the way I recommend doing it is finding out not only if you'll like the job and if you can get the job, but learning what are some of the struggles that the team's dealing with, and what are some of the big pain points or priorities for the team that you learn about through these conversations. Naturally, they're just going to come up, and you can use that information to your advantage with making sure that you're actually tailoring yourself as a solution to those problems. So, and then you know what experience to highlight and what type of projects to highlight, because at the end of the day, you can only fit so much on a resume. You don't want to pour out everything, or otherwise it dilutes your message. But then you can make sure that it's really focused on the things that the hiring manager is going to be most interested in reading.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you said we need to complete our marketing documents. And I think too often, or at least in the past, resume was just a resume. You list your skills and what you've done, and that's it. But I think one of the things I notice is, as we look at personal branding as a whole and really trying to look at ourselves as kind of the business of me. Yep. Which really is a big mind shift, because now it's your business. It means that you have to take control of it and run it. Mm-hmm. I find it interesting now that resumes and cover letters are marketing documents, because if you're a business, you're going to have to market yourself. So rather than look at them, I think, as a resume or a cover letter, it's important, I think, to look at it as a marketing document.
Exactly. And I mean, you know more than anyone that your personal brand is more than just a resume and a cover letter. It's everywhere.
So I want to ask you a question about cover letters, because I get mixed emotions and mixed comments and feelings and all that stuff about cover letters. And I'll just start with the first question is, do people even read them?
You know, if you're going to just apply cold through the gate, it's more than likely not going to happen. I think a cover letter is really helpful when you're actually giving your application to somebody in their hands that you know is going to receive it and you know is going to read it, because you have either an introduction or some type of relationship. But I think what's helpful with that is you can tell more of a story and show a little bit more about your characteristics and your personality that maybe doesn't come off through a resume. And so I have seen it help people stand out depending on how you use it.
Do you find that cover letters more valuable for, say, candidates who are applying for a position that may not be directly related to everything that they've done in the past?
Yes, definitely. I think for a new grad or somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience in the space that they want to get into, I think it's easy for somebody to just gloss over your resume and say this person has no experience. But I think it's good to help them see the connections better with how your skills and experience transfers to that job, and showing a little bit about how you've been successful in the past could actually translate into that role. So I think I really like cover letters for marketing purposes. I don't like them for application purposes, if that makes sense.
Can you submit a cover letter via online tracking systems and applications?
Some of them, yeah. Some of them allow you to attach an attachment.
Okay. All right. Obviously I haven't applied for a position in a while. All right. So we're at this career narrative statement. We have so far identified target jobs, target titles. We've found people who do those or did those in the past. We've reached out to them. We have learned more about the position and, really whether we wanted the job or would like the job and whether we feel we could get the job. We've reached out to people. We're following up. We've crafted our career narrative. We've not yet applied for a job. So we move into the final stage, which is the red carpet application process. And I'm going to assume by the title that this is the time when we can actually start to apply for positions.
Yes. And to be completely upfront, along the way, opportunities pop up just by naturally going through this process. Sometimes before you even reach the career narrative stage, you have people that are willing to help you or share an opportunity even without you asking. So that's why this process is so great, because you don't have to feel like you're being desperate and bugging people and asking for a job. It's naturally going to happen because they see the type of initiative you're taking, and people love that and they want to help people like that. So along the way, you could very likely be getting opportunities through your follow-up process.
Yeah, I think steps 1, 2, and 3, so target identification, market validation, and consistent connection, you're really indirectly applying for positions.
Exactly. You're putting yourself out there so that you're front of mind if something does come up.
Right. And then when you craft your career narrative, you're tying together everything that you're learning as you go along the way. And then hopefully by the time you get to the red carpet application, where you start to actually apply for different positions, you're not just sending your resume into the online application system. You're actually sending your resume directly to someone who can do something about it.
Exactly.
Are there any special steps in the red carpet application, or is this just one where you're now actively going to reach back out maybe to the folks that you've already spoken to and really say, okay, now I would like to apply for the job?
Yeah, exactly. So you'll want to reach back out to the people that you've been connecting with and ask them for introductions to the person who would ultimately make the decision.
So that kind of runs us through the process. In your experience, I know you did some research for the book. What do you see if you were to compare, say, the conventional application process versus the career upgrade roadmap process? What do you see as the differences between the two as you did your research from a effectivity standpoint?
I would say that it's way more targeted and you're front loading the work. So at first glance, when you see this process, it sounds like a lot of work. And it doesn't sound like something that people are excited to jump into. But at the end of the day, you could either apply to 100 jobs and not hear anything back, or you could apply to 5 and get 3 interviews. That's really kind of the difference as in the process, is you're actually building the relationship. And when you have that relationship, people are more willing to help you because they know you, they like you, and they trust you.
Now, you didn't just write a book and put it out there. You also wrote a companion workbook that goes along with the book, and you can download that for free. Can you talk a little bit about what are people going to find inside the workbook?
Yeah, so the workbook includes all the word for word scripts of what to say, and these are just examples that have worked for me or my clients. And then also I've included just really more resource documents that dig deeper on the step-by-step of how to do the process, because I know a lot of times people want to see concrete examples of a cover letter or what messages do they send and what do they say in this email. And I know people get really caught up in that. So I've provided examples so that you don't have to get stuck and paralyzed with those types of decisions. You can still keep getting momentum and taking action.
Do you see this process working more for someone who is trying to advance themselves in the same career position that they're in? So say they're trying to go from a manager to a director, or a director to a vice president or something like that. Or is it more effective, do you think, for people who are trying to maybe do a career pivot?
I would say it would work for both, because when you're making a transition, you're not exactly sure what path to take, and you have a lot of doubts as to what's next because you've done one thing for so long. So I think it's really good to go through this process to solidify what you want and what makes sense as the next move. And then for the person that's looking to get higher up in the corporate ladder, I would say it's even more important because those positions are definitely not going to be posted online.
So as I look back at 50 plus podcasts now and 45 interviews, I would take your book and I would say your book is a summation of all the different podcasts that I've done and all the different people that I have spoken to.
Wow.
And you've taken it and you put it into a package that is easy to read, very actionable, And it's something that people will walk away from. And, it's going to mess with your mind, if you will, if you're only used to doing things a certain way. But, one of the first things that you said in your book that I really liked, there were two things, is that if you want to change the outcome of your career, you must first change your decision-making process that got you to where you are in the first place. And then another one that really struck a chord with me is that we've been programmed to think a certain way about our career, and it just doesn't work that way anymore. And I really think that you have summed up how people advance and move around in their careers today better in one place than I found anyone else with your book.
Thank you. That was really my goal because, like you, I'm kind of a career development junkie. I read it all, I soak it all up, and I try to, use it. And I really felt like there was pieces of everything I wanted to put together, but they all didn't have everything. So that was my goal with the book. So that I'm really glad to hear that.
Mission accomplished then. Well, I know people are going to want to learn more. So Olivia, what are some of the best ways for people to get in touch with you, to buy the book, to find out more about your course, and really to kind of get started with their own career upgrades?
Thank you. So you can find more about me at occupationalolivia.com. And there I also have a 5-day free video series that you can sign up just to get started. I know some people like video more than reading a book, but other than that, the book is called The Career Upgrade Roadmap, and you can find that on Amazon. I have the Kindle version and also the paperback. And yeah, other than that, I like to be on LinkedIn a lot. So that's also a really great way to connect with me. You can just type in Olivia Gamber, and I think I'm one of the only Olivia Gambers out there. There may be one or two others, but I'm the girl in the glasses.
Yeah, I do love how you've branded yourself with your glasses in a lot of different places.
I love glasses. So yeah, I know it was funny. And my little sister actually helped me come up with the Occupational Olivia branding. So that's kind of the funny story behind that.
Well, it works. So any final thoughts, anything you'd like to make sure that people leave with as they, as the podcast wraps up here, that you want to make sure that they take away?
I would just say take action and read the book, because that is some of my best material that I think it does capture some of the best advice that I've had, because I've purchased a lot of courses and read a lot of books, and I really just want to help people make a difference. Well,
Olivia, I believe that your book is going to make a difference, and I appreciate you spending and sharing some of your time and knowledge with us today.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
I think you'll agree. The job search process has really changed over the last few years. For many of us, the process we grew up with is no more. Gone are the days where you could play the application game of monsters and ladders and hope a good Indeed would take you higher. To get the best jobs today, the ones that pay better and that provide you with a more fulfilling career, requires effort on our part. As I think back to the conversations we've had on this podcast, including the ones with Tim, Lee, Hannah, Carl, Dory, Mark, Richard, Don, Kylie, Lisa, Linda, David, Katrina, Audra, and now Olivia, 2 words come to mind: effort and networking. Olivia's book spells out for you the steps required to upgrade your career in today's environment, but her book won't help you if you don't put in the effort and you don't expand your network. Olivia, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. Hopefully everyone listening will put in the effort required to upgrade their careers over the next 90 days. For those of you listening in today, I know you have a growing list of podcasts to choose from, and I sincerely thank you for tuning in to listen to Olivia and I's conversation. I'll have all the show notes, including the links to everything we discussed, on the blog over at ryanroten.com/Olivia Gamber. And just because the podcast is over for today doesn't mean that we can't carry on the conversation. Head on over to facebook.com/brand new you podcast. There you'll be able to leave your comments and ask any additional questions that you may have about how to upgrade your career. So that wraps us up for today. Until next week, I've been Ryan, and I'm out.